Let's talk about J.K. Rowling. All right. Okay. Let me also say. Let me also say that the initial images that came out on this Harry Potter show, I don't even know who the fuck this is for. I don't know why people need to watch this show. There's almost an uncanny valley sense to it because, with the exception of some race swapping casting changes, there's no difference. They did the entire story in 7 films. 7 films that came out in the last 2 decades, like in the 2000s. The last film came out in 2011. So I know people love Harry Potter. I know I was a millennial who grew up on Harry Potter. I also loved Harry Potter. And the J.K. Rowling transphobia side, which you really cannot put aside, and we're going to talk all about it, I just don't get why, especially millennials, people in their 30s and 40s, do you really need more Harry Potter? Do you really need a show that is just the movies but in show format? What are we doing? Like, there's nothing new here. Exactly. It's the same story. It's the same story. They did 7 films. So aren't you good? Aren't you good? Do you really, really need this show? And for kids, guess what? They can watch the movies. It's not like these movies were made 100 years ago and they are revamping them for a modern audience. Like, my God. Okay. Anyway, J.K. Rowling says, I'm so happy with HBO's Harry Potter series right after celebrating the Olympics for banning trans women from female events. I have to say, I was actually pretty shocked to see this framing. I usually have a lot of criticism for Variety and other publications and the way that they frame stuff, but this is actually an A+ headline. I think the connection here is a very important one. And I'm glad that this author, this journalist in the same headline said, J.K. Rowling is happy about the Harry Potter series and says this right after she has celebrated the Olympics. And that's the thing, too. She talked more about this ban on trans women in the Olympics than she talked about the fucking Harry Potter show. Because she doesn't care about that. What she cares is the Harry Potter show is more money for her, money to strip trans people of their rights, to continue to make their lives so much harder. And also because she views people who support Harry Potter still, who watch the trailer, whatever, are going to watch the show as in agreement with her. She is the She operates from this way of thinking that people who will continue to support Harry Potter do so because they support her views on trans people. The International Olympic Committee's decision to ban transgender women from competing in women's events at the Olympic Games has found unsurprising support in Harry Potter author J.K. Rowling, who has regularly come under fire since 2017 for sharing anti-trans views on social media. And as we will get into it on Princess Week's video, it is not just sharing anti-trans views on social media. Now, that is a devastating aspect here because she has an enormous audience. She has millions and millions and millions of followers and is very influential. But in addition to this, she is an anti-trans activist. She is actively campaigning, financing, using her power to get legislation passed, to get laws and rules passed that prohibit trans people from living a full and free life. Today's ruling by the IOC means a welcome return to fair sport for women and girls, but I'll never forget the scandal of Paris 2024, when people who consider themselves supremely virtuous and progressive publicly cheered on men punching women. Rowling posted on Twitter referring to the IOC's decision to allow Algeria's Iman Khalif to compete in the women's boxing competition at the Summer Games. Rowling denounced the Olympics in 2024 for allowing Khalif to box other women. Khalif was disqualified from the Women's World Championships a year prior after failing a gender eligibility test due to elevated levels of testosterone in her system. Khalif is a woman. She is a cisgender woman. She's literally a cisgender woman. Could any picture sum up our new men's rights movement better? Rowling wrote on Twitter during the 2024 Olympics while sharing a picture of Italy's Angela Carini in tears and Khalif trying to comfort her after the latter defeated her opponent in 46 seconds because Carini bowed out of the match. The smirk of a male who knows he's protected by a misogynist sporting establishment enjoying the distress of a woman he's just punched in the head and whose life's ambition he's just shattered. The Olympics stood by its decision to allow Khalif, who was born female, to compete in the women's boxing competition, saying everyone competing in the women's category is complying with the competition eligibility rules. They are women in their passports, and it is stated that it is the case that they are female. The IOC announced on March 26 that transgender women would be banned from events at future Olympic Games. The organization issued the following statement: eligibility for any female category event at the Olympic Games or any other IOC event, including individual and team sports, is now limited to biological females. It's terrible. This will reshape sports worldwide. This will have an effect on not just trans athletes, but also cis athletes across all sports. It's horrifying. It really is. And remember that the IOC abandoned sex testing in 1999 because of the issues with sex testing and how it is inherently racist as well. Matt Bernstein had a good tweet on this. Yes, he did. I retweeted him. In the entire history of the Olympics, more than 10,000 athletes each summer games and 3,000 each winter. Since 1896, this would have applied to one woman who did not place in anything. It is complete and total political theater, and people like J.K. Rowling are responsible for decisions like this being passed. It's inherently misogynistic, of course. Yes. In the way that Iman Khalif was targeted because she does not fit the standard for what a feminine woman should look like. It's racist, it's misogynistic, it's dehumanizing, it's horrifying, it's segregationist. Yeah. Rowling has often taken to X to denounce transgender women competing in women's sports. She infamously got into a social media spat with John Oliver over the issue, calling him an undoubtedly intelligent person who spouts absolute bullshit after he claimed there's no evidence that transgender athletes pose any threat to safety or fairness. Rowling's celebration of the IOC's decision to ban transgender athletes was followed by quick praise, like a side note. She doesn't give a fuck. Like, she truly doesn't really care about this because she is driven in life. Her purpose is to destroy trans people. She hates trans people. She does not believe that they have the right to exist. She does not believe that trans people are real, frankly. She does not believe that they deserve dignities and liberties and to be treated as human beings. Rowling's celebration was followed by quick praise for the Harry Potter reboot series. She's been involved in the series development and consulted with studio executives during its making. It's going to be incredible. I'm so happy with it. She responded to a fan about 20 minutes after praising the Olympics ban. Fuck J.K. Rowling. Fuck the Olympics. People can watch whatever they want, but Rowling is personally funding anti-trans legislation with every dollar she profits off Harry Potter. It's not just a stand she has, it's her whole mission. There's no deniability here. It's what you're supporting. Obviously, there's problematic artists everywhere that people and even I enjoy, but it's difficult to think of one that's more harmful on the scale that Rowling is. Rowling is causing material harm on a global level. She is actively and also explicit in how she uses her resources and her platform to deny human beings the rights that they deserve.
When people act that, this judgment has made it clear. On April 16th, 2025, the United Kingdom Supreme Court made an amendment to the Equality Act of 2010. This amendment legally codified the definition of woman under biological sex. Dr. Michael Foran, a lecturer at Glasgow University, explained that while trans women are still protected under the law, that this judgment has made it clear that it is lawful to exclude biological males from female-only services, where those female-only services are lawful under the Equality Act.
Imagine if J.K. Rowling spent 1 ounce of the money and time and energy in going after actual abusers, powerful abusers like Epstein's associates, like we see all over the place. Imagine that she were to direct her energy and her money and her platform that way to actually be protecting women, to actually care about women's safety and women's rights and women's dignities. She would have to go after herself.
Public services like toilets will be.
Of
course, what this means
for
trans men is left up in the air because transphobes rarely consider them in these conversations.
She doesn't give a fuck about actual abusers.
Because how are you going to stop a man, a normal man, going into a woman's toilets and saying, I'm a trans man? And so I think we have to look at...
She sent flowers to Marilyn Manson. She had a friendly exchange with Tristan Tate.
I don't follow that logic.
Why?
Because the point is that we're saying that people who are biologically men shouldn't be using women's toilets. That's the point of this ruling, among other things.
But a trans man is biologically a woman.
Someone who's transitioned from being a woman to a man is...
And so they would then have to use women's toilets.
I think this...
They just broke his brain. Broke his brain by presenting it in this obvious common sense, like how absurd this is, how ridiculous this is. So you're saying the problem is, okay. Problem is that you don't want trans women in women's bathrooms because you believe trans women are men. And you're saying we can't have men in women's bathrooms. But then you would have, in your logic, you know what? Let me just run this back because it's so fucking good.
We have to look at
the pause. This is seeing someone's brain fried in real time.
Follow that logic.
Why?
Because the point is that we're saying that people who are biologically men shouldn't be using women's toilets. That's the point of this ruling, among other things.
But a trans man is biologically a woman.
Someone who's transitioned from being a woman to a man is...
And so they would then have to use women's toilets.
I think this...
And that's the problem.
This challenge to the act was brought by the transphobic group For Women Scotland, or FWS, a group formed in 2018
Buffering.
That has, from my...
Trans men are always the thing that breaks these people's brains. They forget they exist. Yes, they do. They forget that trans men exist. This happens when people are also advocating for trans rights. They forget trans men exist as well. But same with transphobes who focus on like women's sports, right? Women's bathrooms, forgetting about trans men. So many people don't even realize trans men are often banned from both bathrooms and have been assaulted and killed before for it. Yeah. It's, it's the absurdity of it with these fucking bathrooms.
My research done absolutely nothing about women's
Where
rights.
would you like trans people to go to the bathroom? Where would you like them? So what, are you just going to make totally separate bathrooms? Is this going to be a segregationist thing? So there'll be separate bathrooms for trans men. There'll be separate bathrooms for trans women. Should we get a non-binary up in here? Like,
and only exist to perpetuate transphobia.
A non-binary
they
bathroom.
are a feminist organization with no feminist ideology or political interest outside of harassing trans women, despite this being, quite frankly, a horrible fucking time to be a woman in the world. It was shared that J.K. Rowling
10 different bathrooms just to appease everyone's phobias. Yet the truth is that transphobes do not want trans people in public. They do not want to see them existing. They don't want them to exist, period. But what they can at least tangibly, materially do is to make it so much more difficult for trans people to exist in public life. Same thing with what the disabled community experiences. Which of course, cross over there with someone who's trans and disabled. And the whole point is that structurally, we make our society incredibly hostile to members of these groups because we do not want them to be in public. We want to make life so much harder for them. It's okay, if you exist, then exist invisibly and privately, and do not participate in public life. Assimilate or die.
The author of the Harry Potter books, donated £70,000 of her own money to helping fund this group and their challenge. She has had long ties with this group and in 2021 called these women her sisters. This is £70,000 that she's earned in royalties from the Harry Potter franchise from people who participate in that fandom financially, despite knowing as of 2018 where her money goes to. So, congratulations! Once again, the conversation arose around consuming the Harry Potter IP, a conversation that has now expanded to include the fandom at large, things like fan fiction and fan art. For me, as someone who has spoken about this issue before, links everywhere, I have tried largely to support my trans colleagues and allow them to
Seems more simple to just ban TERFs from bathrooms. See, well, now there's an idea
on this issue themselves and lead that conversation.
3 months.
Especially since I don't consider myself to be a perfect ally. I think considering yourself to be a perfect ally is just sort of like an ego stroking, and I do still read fan fiction. But I think we've reached a point in this entire conversation where cis people who still want to have a toe in this particular IP need to, quite frankly, get a harsh fucking reality check, because the shock that people feel about this, about J.K. Rowling using her money this way, feels very disingenuous. This is J.K. Rowling's passion, harassment, bigotry, and then crying about it. Peak white woman behavior. While I'm going to link down below to the commentary of trans women specifically speaking about this topic, because I think it's important to highlight and uplift those voices, I am making this video because just the same way that people tend to believe race issues coming more from white people, hopefully
So one reason that I think J.K. Rowling went so hardcore into the anti-trans activism and being just a full-on transphobe is back in 2018, she liked an anti-trans tweet, and fans of hers called her out. They criticized her for that, and she said it was an accident. She's like, I didn't mean to do that. It was a tweet that referred to trans women as men in dresses. And she said, like, I'm just a clumsy middle-aged woman and was holding my phone incorrectly. And I just absent-mindedly liked this tweet when I meant to screenshot it instead, because I have an interest in gender identity and transgender matters. And I think what happened here, or one of the big factors at play, is that J.K. Rowling was a person who looked at the criticism she received, took it so goddamn personally, was incensed, and it eventually like it made her feel self-righteous. It made her feel, even though in the beginning she was like, well, I didn't mean to do this. As she went deeper into her journey on gender identity and transgender matters, and that also, you know, I'm not saying that it was like people calling her out, but I do believe it was like a classic, I'm being canceled. How fucking dare you? I'm going to go 100 times harder. She hates that people bring up her racist as fuck names. She hates being called out, like a lot of egotistical, wealthy, privileged celebrities respond. I mean, really, like the behavior of a lot of people who do the why I left the left, or I've been driven into the, you know, I'm being driven into the arms of the right because of woke ideology, because of out of control cancel culture, where the seeds were there. Okay. The seeds were, of course, there. These are not morally principled, consistently good people. If they are that easily able to turn to fascism, because people online called them out, criticized them, you know? But yes, she does. I think when you look at the timeline here and how she would regularly fight, does still, with people online, and you can see how pissed it was like a how dare you criticize me. Okay, here's the timeline. In 2018, she likes an anti-trans tweet. Yep, that's what I just referenced. In 2019, and she says it was an accident. Follows self-professed transphobe on Twitter. Magdalene Burns. Burns was a self-professed transphobe. Made videos with titles like "There's no such thing as a lesbian with a penis." Rowling later admitted she followed Burns, an immensely brave young feminist and lesbian who was dying of an aggressive brain tumor, because she wanted to contact her directly. You're telling me that this woman, this lesbian woman, was dying of an aggressive brain tumor, and on the way out was like, let me do transphobia. Was this like one of these anti-trans brain tumors? Was this like what Fetterman was hit with? What the fuck? How? How are you dying, and the last thing that you do in like as you are exiting before your time too off this planet, you're like, yeah, let me try and make life so hard for trans people. If that's the last thing I do, let me be a fucking transphobe on the way out. You know, I just have to say, and knock on wood, this doesn't happen to me, but if I'm dying of an aggressive brain tumor, I think I'd probably focus on love. I think I'd probably focus on just cherishing my final moments, appreciating everything and everyone. You know, maybe get in a couple last speeches about how once I'm gone, I hope this world is on a path to be a better world for those who are left behind after I'm no longer here. That the things that I care about, that I hope to see them materialized. Burn it all down, but specifically towards trans people. Anyway. And then in 2019, Rowling stands with a researcher who lost contract over anti-trans statements. See, here's the cancel culture. Cancel culture. 2020, Rowling likes another controversial tweet. 2020, Rowling's tweet sparked backlash. Yeah, this is when I remember she starts to really go in on the transphobic tweets, and this was COVID. 2020, Rowling publishes an essay defending her stance as actors speak out. Yep, actors from the Harry Potter film franchise began to speak out against Rowling. Daniel Radcliffe wrote a post on Trevor Project's website condemning her tweets. Eddie Redmayne said trans women are women, trans men are men, non-binary identities are valid. In 2020, Rowling returns award after being condemned for her statements. She received the Robert F. Kennedy Human Rights Ripple of Hope Award in 2019. The Human Rights Group president released a statement saying, "We were profoundly disappointed that J.K. Rowling is a fucking turf." And she said, "Okay, I'm giving this award back." 2020 critics suggest Rowling's new novel is anti-trans, a novel titled Troubled Blood, under the pseudonym of Robert Galbraith. Just the fucking irony. 2021, Rowling criticizes the police for letting rape suspects identify as women. 2022, Rowling criticizes a bill that would make legally changing gender easier. 2022, Quidditch distances itself from Rowling. 2022, she publishes a book about a character being accused of transphobia. Oh my God, she fucking sucks so hard. 2022, she responds to calls to boycott Hogwarts Legacy. 2024, Rowling targets Scotland's new hate crime law. 2024, she's named a cyberbullying lawsuit, then responds to Donald Trump's win and aligned with him on them being, going after trans people. 2024, Rowling attacks another athlete. Rowling insists trans kids do not exist. And that was the thing too, is that it has changed over time. In the beginning, J.K. Rowling tried to make it seem as if she believed trans people are real, but she just disagrees with certain elements here. And then it got to a point which we already knew, but then she would publicly say that she doesn't actually believe in the existence of trans people. And I think she tries to say still, though, like, I'm talking about trans kids. It's like, do you think that then suddenly trans adults just poof appear? Okay. Rowling celebrates UK Supreme Court ruling. Rowling launches fund for women's sex-based rights. Rowling criticizes Potter director. Rowling attacks another Potter actor. British MP clashes with Rowling. Rowling blasts Glamour UK for honoring trans women. Yeah, and Rowling defenders, not all of them, but some of them will try and claim J.K. Rowling doesn't hate trans people. She just wants to strip them of their rights. And here's the thing. J.K. Rowling may not have said the literal words, I hate trans people, but her actions, and there are so many of them, absolutely indicate that is her exact feeling. Do you think in like slasher films, in a Halloween, in a Friday the 13th, like do they say I specifically hate, well, Laurie what's his name's mom did, but it, like, that's just that it's so that doesn't work. It doesn't work to say no, she doesn't hate trans people. It's just that everything she does clearly indicates that she does.
As a cis woman talking about this to other cis people will allow them to actually hear what is being said and not just project all of their weirdness onto this topic. Because I understand that people have questions. The problem is you're not actually opening your ears. Hello, as you can tell from the hair, the nails, and everything else, this was filmed later. This is part of the addendum. Between filming and editing things, stuff popped up. So I just wanted to come in, add a little bit of, information to what we're talking about. I also realized that I pronounced J.K. Rowling's name in the wrong way, but I did look it up and she does not care, so I don't either. So yeah, if you see this face, because we're adding in some more context to the story.
She says the idea came to her mysteriously, and in a flash, a fully formed boy took shape in her head.
J.K. Rowling first published Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone in 1997. If you were in the United States, it was published under Sorcerer's Stone because they didn't think that American kids would know what a philosopher was because it was too archaic according to Scholastic. And
they're like, American kids are too stupid.
However, I will concede that the UK title is better and makes more sense. The Philosopher's Stone is something that already existed in fantasy, but part of the appeal of Harry Potter...
Am I old-fashioned because I don't want someone else to fuck my girlfriend? Okay, I know I was just gone getting water, but what? Does that have something to do with what I missed in the, 45 seconds? that I left to go get water? What does that mean? Are you in the wrong place? Who's trying to fuck your girlfriend? Besides what Aham is trying to force Lindy West into by saying that it's actually racist if she does not allow him to have other girlfriends and to be poly. I was watching Will Neff. Okay, do you know what chat you're in? Do you see this? Do you see what video we're watching here? Why did you fuck their girlfriend? You know, I am out here fucking people's girlfriends. Sorry. Oops, you got me.
Potter is that they don't really have to have a broad
Yeah, I'm Mrs. Steal Yo Girl. Okay, I am Mrs. Steal Yo Girl. That's gonna be my new thing.
Understanding of fantasy to be able to access the book. So I get going from philosopher to sorcerer.
Zip-zox,
That
thank
book
you for
and the
12
subsequent
months.
6 went on to become a massive phenomena in publishing that has yet to be truly replicated. The series has sold over 60 million copies, translated into over 70
if Will is fucking your dads, I'm gonna be out here fucking your girlfriends.
languages, and is sold in over 200 countries. The New York Times Children's Literature Bestsellers list was created because of the popularity of this particular book series. It would then spawn successful movies that have generated over $7 billion for Warner Brothers, and is now getting a TV reboot, but we'll put a pin in that. We will get back to that later. The franchise has also produced pretty okay but kind of meh video games and a collection of studio parks and tourist attractions across the United Kingdom.
And like I said, the show is giving Uncanny Valley. I understand when I say I don't understand who this is for or why they're doing it. It's money. Obviously, it's money. But there's nothing new here. There's no new story. There's no let's do like let's a sequel or prequel this. There's no need for a reboot. There's no purpose. It's very bizarre. I saw a couple of the images online and it just is bizarre. It's like Hagrid looks exactly the same. Exactly the same. And you want to know the other thing too? So they have said that this show, they're not going to be releasing yearly seasons because it's just going to take too long. And this show is going to suffer. I promise you, this show is going to suffer from the Stranger Things. It is going to be a Stranger Things all over again, where these kids grow up because they are in this age period where even 1 year's difference produces a hell of a lot of changes. So,
and particularly in Scotland. Forbes reported that J.K. Rowling's biggest cash cow now outside of the books is actually Universal Studios' Wizarding World's attraction. Millennials and younger are the biggest bulk of the fan base because we literally grew up with the series. It, like Star Wars, was popular enough despite being nerdy and in a niche genre that it crossed over, that everyone consumed it. There became a shared cultural language in many ways around these characters. People teach classes using Harry Potter as a touchstone. That naturally...
Yeah, remember when Harry's voice dropped, like in the original movies, when Daniel Radcliffe's voice and other male actors' voices dropped massively in between... What was it, the second and the third movies? It changed up so quick.
Has made Rowling and Warner Brothers a lot of money. J.K. Rowling is one of the richest people in the world and the second highest paid author after
it was like
James
second,
Patterson.
third, or third, and fourth.
With the former now having spent the last 7 years making her anti-trans stances the overwhelming part of her public branding. Like, overwhelmingly so. which has been especially harmful and damaging because of what Rowling represented. There have always been criticisms of Rowling's writing, but she was known as a left-leaning activist for the majority of her career, frequently giving to charities, especially ones surrounding domestic violence, advocating for immigration, and being a major philanthropist. Her series, whatever you think of the writing or now in retrospect, was a life raft for many people across the world. Some of the words she wrote resonated and helped queer people come out, including trans people. When she wrote "Sometimes we sort too soon" in the book by Dumbledore to Snape, in reference to the sorting hat that puts 11-year-olds into...
Yeah, and you want to know who face frequent rates of intimate partner violence, of abuse? Trans people. And then they further face discrimination and mistreatment from the legal system. So it's just, obviously, fuck J.K. Rowling, but it's also sad. It's also so sad to see how once upon a time, these things that she cared about, which were important causes, and that's what she spent like her money and her energy towards. And now this going after one of the most marginalized, oppressed communities who face high rates of domestic violence, face high rates of abuse, further marginalized because and discriminated against because of the legal system and because of our cultural bigotry.
Hogwarts houses that are meant to represent different dominant personality traits, something, you maybe shouldn't do to it.
Insane that she wrote books about a child never feeling like they belong, then realizing something internal about themselves, that it just all clicked, and then Harry had to fight for his very existence just for JK to turn around and hate so many people who identified with her books, myself included. Harry Potter was an escape from my hateful family as a kid. It hurts to feel like I lost that. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, the fantasy genre has often been an escape, a lifeline for so many kids, especially kids who were really struggling, due to whatever factors. But often it's like it was a literal escape from the real world that they were growing up in. Yeah, it just fucking sucks. It sucks.
It was a sentiment that many queer people could and still do understand. That is what has made what happened to her such a deep and personal betrayal to so many. Yeah. Of course, there is the point that this series never actually interrogates this at depth and plays into the binary nature of these houses on a morality scale until the very, very, very end. But I digress. Part of why this transphobia has been so dramatic of a change is because it felt so disjointed from who Rowling had been politically. What is true to the fandom consistency part of this conversation is the aversion to having any in-depth conversations about the problematic things written in the book series itself. In the years before the issue of Rowling's transphobia encompassed conversations about the series, there had always existed some areas of criticism about Rowling and her work. The casual fat phobia, especially when it came to people who were good fat or bad fat. If you were a good character, you are warm
good fat
and cute,
or a bad
but if
fat?
you are bad, it is disgusting and an expression of excess or taking up space in a bullying way. The weird writing around the mythology of the house elves. House elves are on the one hand inspired by brownies, actual creatures from Celtic mythology, but then became a messy allegory for actual slavery.
I'm a brownie. I clean houses.
Before you devour the inhabitants?
Try to stay out of the way. Mostly I work at night. So quiet, you won't even know I'm there.
Brownies in mythology are fey creatures that clean homes at night, but are very easily offended if not treated well, and will leave homes that forget to treat them properly. They have a lot of autonomy in that way. House elves, other than Dobby, very much fit this dynamic of wanting to do work. However, Dobby does want to be free and is represented in a way that makes his situation look more aligned with slavery or indentured servitude. So when we get storylines like Hermione's SPEW, the narrative is confusing in how it handles this issue by treating her with a sense of mockery for not understanding that they don't want to be
Justice for Hermione, justice for Spew.
free, but then they've established this as a horrible situation where these creatures are being abused. So which one is it? Nearly all of Rowling's non-white characters have horrible names, serve very disposable roles in the plot. There is really no relevant non-white character in the stories, which, you know, is disappointing, but not shocking. There are the anti-Semitic tropes, and of course, how mean the books are to women who do not fit a particular standard of being pretty, but not intimidating, but also smart. Fleur Delacour getting shitted on by everybody in the...
I mean, she even goes so far with the stereotypes that the one Irish character is like always blowing himself up, is like always blowing stuff up.
Fourth and fifth book is a clear example of that. People who read fantasy, especially children's fantasy, had always pointed out how derivative the series was of older works that were more niche. For example, I remember when I finally watched The Worst Witch and being very kind of like, not shocked, but very aware of the comparisons between it and Harry Potter.
I'm sure you want the
worst is Kingsley Shacklebolt, though. Kingsley Shacklebolt.
This inspection just as much as we do, Mildred. And given your tendency to cause calamity, it would be preferable to keep you out of the inspector's way.
What do you mean, Miss Harborough?
Hide you.
Sci-fi writer Ursula K. Le Guin once commented when asked about comparisons between her Earthsea books to Rowling's series. What's the difference between being influenced by a body of work and admitting it, and being influenced by a body of work and not admitting it? This last is a situation as I see it.
The goblins
between
as
my A Wizard
bankers.
of Earthsea and J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter. I didn't originate the idea of a school for wizards. If anybody did, it was T.H. White, though he did it in a single throwaway line and didn't develop it. I was the first to do that. Years later, Rowling took the idea and developed it along other lines. She didn't plagiarize. She didn't copy anything. Her book, in fact, could hardly be more different from mine. In style, spirit, everything. The only thing that rankles me is her apparent reluctance to admit that she ever learned anything from other writers. When ignorant critics praised her wonderfully original in inventing the idea of a wizard school, and some of them even seemed to believe that she had invented fantasy, she let them do so. This, I think, was ungenerous. And in the long run,
the concept of J.K. Rowling inventing fantasy.
Unwise. Shout out to Ursula K. Le Guin. Read The Dispossessed. Le Guin
also that is Ursula K. Le Guin shading her. She's just a very good writer. She's a very brilliant writer, and that is how a brilliant writer throws shade.
Said in 2004, I have no great opinion of it, the Harry Potter books. When so many adult critics were carrying on about the, quote, incredible originality of the first Harry Potter book, I read it to find out what the fuss was about, and remained somewhat puzzled. It seemed a lively kid's fantasy, crossed with a, quote, school novel, good fare for its age group, imaginatively derivative, and ethically rather
Ursula is no longer alive.
Spirited. I am not someone, or at least I try not to be someone, who has decided retroactively that the books have no literary value. I have literally helped be part of a Harry Potter class when I was in college that I helped teach and proctor. The books have value, as do most books. But if you look at them just critically as a text, you can tell that there is a massive disconnect between the first few books and the last set. You can tell that there are ideas and threads that Rowling starts with and puts together that do not pay off in any kind of way. There are so many plot holes, missed opportunities, incomplete character arcs, a lack of real world building when it comes to the magic
Creator
legal
fantasy Fantasy, J.R.
the
Tolkien,
blood
he
purity
is considered
stuff.
the
All of it's just very
father of
lazy
modern
allegory
fantasy.
when you dig a little bit deeper. And a lot of the character relationships are just never touched on in ways that could add more depth and originality and care to a series that wants to say so much about World War II and the rise of fascism while not really getting any of it. For example, the Black sisters Narcissa Malfoy, Bellatrix Lestrange, and Andromeda Tonks are based off of the Mitford sisters. The Mitford sisters were part of a sibling group of 6 sisters and a brother from an aristocratic British family that had become very culturally relevant during the 1930s, with 2 sisters, Diana and Unity, becoming fascists, like capital F fascists, and Hitler supporters. One, Jessica, becoming a communist. Another, Nancy, a moderate socialist and novelist. Deborah, a liberal socialite. And finally, Pamela, an alleged lesbian. Because with those numbers, there's got to be one in the family. Fun fact, Jessica's daughter went on to marry a Black Panther, and their child is James Foreman Jr., a prominent Black academic who wrote Locking Up Our Own and is the co-founder of the Maya Angelou School in Washington, D.C. And for the audience that cares about this, he is married to a Black woman. So you have this family of characters inspired by this very real family bond, and it never comes up to mean anything. Like it's
Damn, I wonder what those convos were like between the Nazi sisters and the communist one.
It's almost comical how little this allegory matters in the great scheme of the book. I mean, we don't find out until book 5 that Sirius Black is related to Draco Malfoy. Tonks is killed by her aunt. Tonks is Draco's first cousin. Harry Potter's godson is Draco Malfoy's first cousin, twice removed. This is why there's dreary fan fiction, guys. And it just doesn't even make logical sense that we don't find this out until Order of the Phoenix, because you mean to tell me that in book 3, where Sirius is still considered evil and he's out there attempting to kill Harry, Harry's biggest op isn't out here like, shout out to my cousin. It is, like many of the racial and social commentary, very, very painfully superficial. But again, to an audience who would have read these books as kids and aren't necessarily like digging around in World War II history, like World War I, World War II history, it's not something that comes up until you do a deeper analysis of the work. Rowling has been able to capitalize on being this crafter of youthful imagination, this possibility of adventure. Just like once upon a time, people very likely dreamed of finding a wardrobe that would take them to Narnia, people actively wanted their Hogwarts letter. The promise of escapism is sometimes more important to readers than anything else. And those nostalgia moments create a barrier among people who are able to grow up with the series and see it as something beyond that first layer, and those who just want to stay in Neverland.
On a personal level as well, because
lesbianism is where we draw the line, certain Bridgerton fans. Oh my God. I actually saw that. I saw so much disgusting hate comments from Bridgerton stans because the next season in Bridgerton is going to explore a sapphic relationship. And it's funny because a lot of people are pissed that Eloise is not getting her season. I'm like, isn't the whole thing with Eloise's character that she is trying to reject what she views as an oppressive structure that she does not want to be forced into marriage, that she is looking at this world around her under, you know, she's obviously very, very privileged and high class, but I just am like, so y'all are so upset because you want the one character who very much so insists that she doesn't want to get married, that she does not want to be trapped by the chains and blah, 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 blah. And simultaneously angry because of the exploration of a sapphic love story in the upcoming season. They're skipping to the best one because Eloise's book is shit. She plays nanny to her pen pal and marries him. Yeah, that's garbage. Who cares? And you know what's interesting is like So they announced the next season for Bridgerton, and I saw a lot of Bridgerton fans angrily rejecting the upcoming Sapphic season. And it was happening at the same time as the Chappell Roan hate campaign, and it just reinforced the understanding that a lot of people are very uncomfortable with lesbians. They are probably comfortable with gay men. Like they probably would not consider themselves to be homophobic and would be like, I like gay men, I have gay friends, but they have a discomfort with lesbians. And this is a lot of women who are Bridgerton fans who are homophobic, but specifically towards lesbian women.
I've always had my own suspicions.
I mean, honestly, when my best friend came out as a lesbian and she married a woman, I could sense that discomfort that wasn't necessarily expressed. There were a couple people in our college friend group who said some comments that they needed to have their asses handed to them, but it was just like it was like a well, what? I don't understand because you've dated men before. Wait, so are you bi? It was like this even not understanding how she could be a lesbian and going, well, are you sure you're not bi? Are you sure? Like maybe you're bi. Where there's still it was still this need to have a sexual attraction to men. They all love heated rivalry, but God forbid there's a lesbian love story on Bridgerton. Yep, bingo. It's like, okay, I see you guys signing up for 8 seasons of heated rivalry, but you do not want to see a lesbian love story.
About this, Dumbledore being gay.
Rowling's
People really struggle with the rejection of men.
LGBTQ
Totally.
Community before 2018 was overall positive. Mostly, the 2 big statements she made that were of interest to the community was the reveal that Albus Dumbledore was gay and that lycanthropy in the books was an allegory for HIV and AIDS. We'll start with that one. In the 3rd book, Prisoner of Azkaban, we are introduced to the character
guy I don't know how anyone
of
could
Remus
find
Lupin. And would you believe a secret werewolf with a name like that?
Yeah, see, this is how you
In
know
the
it's not
world
a
of Harry
choice.
Potter, magical creatures are considered second-class citizens, and werewolves are stigmatized because of a fear that they will bite people and turn them into werewolves. Firstly, we had to discuss the trope of fantastical racism. This will be a larger discussion on here at a later time because it will allow me to talk about one of my favorite hyperfixation shows, Defiance, at long last. To sum it up, fantastical racism uses mythological creatures and other imaginary groups to stand in for the oppression of real-life marginalized peoples, often as an allegory, or sometimes in tandem like True Blood. And
It's such a good video. Princess Weeks is
poorly
awesome.
handled.
Love her.
So in terms of HIV and lycanthropy, HIV is a virus
I
that
first
attacks
found
the
her,
body's immune
when she was
system
on
that can be transferred
the podcast
through blood
you're wrong about.
and certain bodily fluids: semen, pre-seminal fluid, pre-cum, rectal fluids, and vaginal fluids. You can get it from sex, sharing needles, blood transfusions, etc. AIDS is the last stage of HIV infection that occurs when the body's immune system is badly damaged because of the virus, usually because there is no medication. On a purely surface level, I can understand how when monsters are allegories for a lot of real life ills in our world, or discrimination and mental illness, as messy as it is, I could get why this would be like a first draft idea, right? But then you go a little bit deeper and you start to ask, why did you make this character choice for this particular STI? Lupin was turned into a werewolf as a child by Fëanor Greyback. Greyback does this because Lupin's father makes a statement that werewolves are soulless, evil, and deserving nothing but death after Greyback attacks 2 muggle children, right? So in this allegory for HIV, we have 2 named werewolves of importance, right? One is a victim of discrimination and is like narratively forced into a heterosexual relationship in order to have a child and then die tragically for the narrative. J.K. Rowling said she wanted an orphan, so sorry, Remus, you have to be straight and reproduce and then die. And then the other is an active child predator that wants to spread his condition to younger and younger people. You see how this is weird? The allegory only works if Lupin exists or if Greyback isn't a massive predatory cliche, but it's not. Plus, to have an HIV metaphor with a heterosexual man and a child predator representing a condition that at large impacts the queer community and marginalized people just feels very inelegant and cheap. It's also important for my American audience to understand that HIV and AIDS was much worse here than it was in the UK and other parts of Europe. Back in 2014, Michael Hobbs, friend of the show, wrote about this for the New Republic. Almost immediately after those first tests, Western European countries installed needle exchange programs, gave out free syringes, and established opiate substitution treatment. Germany even got needle vending machines. By 1997, England and Wales were giving out 25 million free syringes per day, anything to keep the virus from spreading, even if it meant making it a little easier to be a heroin addict that day. The United States, on the other hand, refused to provide federal funds for needle exchanges or even fund research into whether they were effective. Exchanges were established in some cities. By 1990, New York City was distributing 250,000 syringes a year, but they never achieved the coverage of the countrywide programs in Western Europe. I'm not trying to imply that the UK was some magical place for gay people or people with HIV and AIDS, but we can just see in terms of the social reality that the UK and Scotland did a lot of work to try and protect people versus the United States. Werewolves have often been a metaphor.
Yeah. I wonder if that has to do with at the time of the AIDS crisis. And I know that this is sick as fuck, but they not only denied the seriousness of it, but I think there was an element there of, oh, this is something that kills gay people? Oh, this is something that's wiping out so many members of the gay community? Yeah, I don't think that we need to act I don't think we really need to act here, and certainly not in ways that will protect this community. The problem will take care of itself, so to speak. Yeah. Okay, wait. I was reading someone's comment from earlier. This tracks, as I mentioned earlier, J.K. Rowling using Robert Galbraith as her pen name is on the nose. He was a doctor who founded gay conversion therapy and tortured gay people. So... J.K. Rowling has denied that her pen name is inspired by this anti-LGBTQ conversion therapist. But why that name then? Why wouldn't you pick another name or go, yeah, maybe I should not use a pen name that is the name of a famous conversion therapist? Where the fuck are you getting Robert Galbraith from? Huh? Why? What was it that made you feel inspired to choose Robert Galbraith as your pen name? That's so weird. It's very odd. He pioneered the use of shock treatments to cure homosexuality. Robert Galbraith, famous conversion therapist, pioneered the use of shock treatments.
For mental illnesses.
Yeah, but Caroline, she wrote Dumbledore is gay in a script one time. That's
making
true.
it an allegory for a real condition that largely impacts queer people and marginalized people. It's a very messy comparison. It puts queerness in the narrative, but without queer people. Then we go to gay Dumbledore. Man, I am old enough to remember the thriving McGonagall X Dumbledore fan base. Don't let them tell you it wasn't there. I remember it. People thought they were going to fuck. It was October 2007 at Carnegie Hall. Rowling was asked by a fan if Dumbledore had ever found love. She went on to explain
McGonagall in my headcanon was always gay.
That he fell in love with the dark wizard Grindelwald and then turned away from him when Grindelwald got deeper into dark magic. Dumbledore fell in love with Grindelwald, and that added to his horror when Grindelwald showed himself to be what he was. Canon event, honestly. When your partner gets into dark magic without telling you, it just fucks up all your crystals. Now, this was in 2007, and she had just announced that the mentor, the great paternal figure of the books, was a gay man. This was huge. But just like now, people were asking why this wasn't in the book.
McGonagall is for the girls. McGonagall, to me, had a totally separate life. Like, she would go, you know, she cared about Hogwarts and cared about the students and whatnot. And she was an important important educator at Hogwarts. But I always saw her, she was like a totally independent, her private life separate from the shenanigans at school.
Explicitly.
Like, she literally turned into a cat.
That alludes to Dumbledore being gay or even gay-ish. Now, did I think Dumbledore was gay when I was reading the book? Yes, but for homophobic reasons. Anyone can have a twinkle in their eye and enjoy feminine hats. So it was actually problematic of me. And people have tried to make excuses for this by saying that, like, Harry is a kid. We're seeing it through Harry's POV. Therefore, we would not know if Dumbledore was gay. And all I can say is that, as heterosexual as these fucking books are, you cannot convince me that that is an actual argument. Like, I'm sorry, I'm not gonna sit here and like be reminded of the explanation about love potion and everything that happens in the Half-Blood Prince that we all had to be subjected to for you to tell me homosexual longing was out of the scope.
Okay. And to me, it was not a big deal. This is a very old man who has a very terrible job to do. And his gayness is not really... It's not really relevant. Very relevant to him as a character, because I always saw him as a very lonely character.
But Rowling really stood behind this decision and wrote this tweet in 2015 when someone said they couldn't see Dumbledore as gay. And she responded, maybe because gay people just look like people. Gay Dumbledore was the beginning of Rowling dropping these diversity nuggets into the narrative. Are there Jewish characters in Harry Potter? Of course. You've never seen them. We've never mentioned a single Jewish holiday, even though we mention Christmas all the time. But there is absolutely a Goldstein somewhere in this castle. I illustrate these points to say that the discussion around Rowling's politics and the book's flaws was always around, but it was always overlooked by the larger fan base that just wanted to enjoy things and turn their brains off, as they are wont to motherfucking do. In addition to not thinking it was that deep, they saw the pretty basic neoliberalism symbolism of magical fascist Nazis as enough of a radical progressive point that even though the series' world building is very incomplete around that it meant that she was obviously a progressive person. And now she compares trans activists to Death Eaters. So really, we should always call into question her lazy character writing. And I will just say this, justice for Cho Chang, justice for Dean Thomas, justice for Kingsley Shacklebolt, because even in fan fiction, you guys make him into being such a fascist. And I'm just like, there's not enough of his character on the page to even give a whiff of that. But you guys will, you know, make Black characters act really weird if you give them attention. Now, while being critical of Rowling's writing, I think most people just assumed it was typical white woman writing in the 90s.
Okay, people definitely, I did get on more than one occasion called Cho Chang when the Harry Potter books were popular when everyone was kids.
Politics in general were okay. In general,
yeah. Michelle
she
Kwan,
did
Cho
vote
Chang.
in campaign against Scottish independence during 2014, but she was also anti-Brexit and anti-Trump. Everything changed in 2019. Actually, 2018. She liked a tweet. She liked a tweet which referred to trans women as men in dresses, but had her representative tell people that it was a middle-aged moment. People's fingers slip. Not everyone realizes that you can see people's likes. People optimistically, hopefully saw it as a one-off.
Voldemort was kind of serving, but I think I'm just attracted to fines.
Was not. Now we go to 2019 and we enter Maya Forstater. Forstater was a tax expert and also the daughter of the producer of Monty Python and the Holy Grail, who did not have her contract renewed by the think tank Center for Global Development. She'd done work for them,
Tom
but
Riddle.
due to her vile opinions about trans women that she shared online, they did not renew her contract, and so she sued them. She said that she was an absolutist about her views and argued that, quote, framing the question of transgender inclusion as an argument that male people should be allowed into women's spaces discounts women's rights to privacy and is fundamentally illiberal. It's like forcing Jewish people to eat pork.
Yeah,
she believed that her
crazy.
opinions were protected under the Equality Act of 2010. So the Equality Act of 2010 brought together several pieces of anti-discrimination legislation to simplify things. Originally in 2019, the judge in this case wrote a 29-page judgment that was published, finding for starter views were incompatible with human dignity and fundamental rights of others, and therefore not afforded protection under the Equality Act. Forstater said that the judgment removes women's rights and the right to freedom of belief and speech. So she lost her initial case, but not before raising more than £85,000 through crowdfunding and getting the public support of J.K. Rowling, who said that she stood with Maya. This is also what made her share the horrific tweet. Dress however you please, call yourself whatever you like, sleep with any consenting adult who'll have you, live your best life in peace and security, but force women out of their jobs for stating that sex is real? Let me just say, as a Black woman, this is so clearly a loaded microaggression, and coached in this "I'm not a bigot" tone that just breeds frustration. And she would go on to say that she loves and supports trans people, but is just trying to protect women. She would then write an entire...
Yeah, and that has changed. She no longer pretends to love and respect trans people.
essay explaining her feelings about this, and I would say for more information and
She's
more in
gotten
depth,
more and more
you can
Nazi.
watch any of ContraPoint's videos to get a deeper look at this. I am purely doing this from the cis perspective. If you could come inside my head and understand what I feel when I read about a trans woman dying at the hands of a violent man, you'd find solidarity and kinship. I have a visceral sense of terror.
I mean, Contra's video on J.K. Rowling is amazing. I think that was the first video I saw of hers. I didn't know who she was till I started streaming. You guys were the ones. It's your fault. I'm just kidding. But there were a lot of people in here who were big Contra fans. And of course, right? Like, understandably. And we're like, oh, she's amazing. She makes great videos. Hospira points now. And yes. And so I think that was the first one that I had seen of hers, was her video on J.K. Rowling. But unfortunately, she cannot, she can't stand against genocide. Hey, it might be too much of a normie. What happened to Contra? Contra is a classic lib, and she was espousing a lot of shit lib Zionist points on the matter of Israel and Palestine, and was condescending towards the pro-Palestinian advocates who were calling out her Zionism. And yeah. And then she was like, well, I'm going... Then I remember she was like, I'm leaving Twitter and going to Blue Sky, but then I'll see her pop up on Twitter still, but she does not get the engagement and traction that she used to. Contra was really good for getting right-wing men out of the pipeline via YouTube back in the day, but trans people have been calling her out for like a decade now. I didn't know that. She was also pretty bad on that. Yeah, I had seen that J.K. Rowling. I don't know if I saw the whole thing, but she thinks if she conforms to people like Clinton, she'll be safe. Yeah, and I know that people criticize her for having that video with Clinton. Anyway, she's unfortunately has lost a lot of former fans and supporters because she just could not have a moral stance against genocide.
in which those trans women will have spent their last seconds on earth. Because I too have known moments of blind fear when I realized that the only thing keeping me alive was the shaky self-restraint of my attacker. I believe the majority of trans-identified people not only pose zero threat to others, but are vulnerable for all the reasons I've outlined. Trans people need and deserve protection. Like women, they're most likely to be killed by sexual partners. Trans women who work in the sex industry, particularly trans women of color, are at particular risk. Like every other domestic abuse and sexual assault survivor I know, I feel nothing but empathy and solidarity with trans women who've been abused by men. On a surface level, that sounds all very reasonable, very nice. She's empathetic, she cares, right? But that's not her whole point. That's not why she's writing this, and that's not why she's defending the words of people like Maya. So I want trans women to be safe. At the same time, I don't want to make natal girls, which what the fuck is that even supposed to mean, and women less safe. When you throw open the doors of bathrooms and changing rooms to any man who believes or feels he's a woman, and as I've said, gender confirmation certificates may now be granted without any need for surgery or hormones, then you open the door to any and all men who wish to come inside. That is the simple truth. And you know what I think is kind of humorous about this is that she's married to a man. A lot of these gender critical transphobes have all this to say about the inherent evil of the penis and men and women's spaces, yet they share their homes with them. Maya appealed her case, and 2 years later, it went in her favor, and she was given a payout of £91,500 and interest of £14,904.31. From 2020 forward, Rowling continued to triple and quadruple down on her gender-critical ideology, penning award-winning essays.
Probably all this
and
fucking
Rowling
transphobia from J.K. Rowling. Oh, I'm expelling it. It's the devil.
Up an already transphobic area, the UK, Turf Island, with her words. She's aligned herself with anti-feminist, anti-gay, and racist groups all in order to push this agenda, and it has been her life's purpose. It's coming out of the screen
every time J.K. Rowling is on screen.
Has made 2 documentary-length videos about this.
I'm
Jesse
allergic
Earl
to
was
the
explicitly
transphobia.
harassed by this woman. Trans women have already been explaining this over and over and over again. What Rowling has done is tap into the pre-existing transphobia and homophobia within society and soften it with this common sense language that has nothing to do with common sense, but has to do with social conditioning and colonial mindsets. I repeat, nothing has to do with common sense. She has attacked non-white cis women for not appearing like women. Colonial motherfucking white supremacy mindset. Transphobes are not new. The differences between sex and gender are not new if you know anything about how people talk about gender studies. The spectrum of these things, again, is not new. You knowing about it, you in a general way, and impacting your daily life is new, and only because we are actively being fed propaganda from people who don't read, don't critically think, and are willing to allow their weird insecurities and hangups to turn them into gender cops rather than talk to people about their actual experience. And it is especially heinous in the United Kingdom.
Author J.K. Rowling made it international news, but it's caused hurt and distress.
As an American, we have plenty of issues of transphobia in this country, and it is getting worse and worse, especially for trans people of color. But there's just something in the colonial waters over there that has made the cis women of the United Kingdom tap into their inner plantation mistress and really define their femininity through the subjugation of
inner plantation mistress. What a phrase.
Others. So it's a classic throwback. When they eat,
it's a classic throwback. Trans folks really think a sign in a bathroom is all it takes to stop rapists and pedos and even those fantasies describing cis men as rapists. Yeah, I don't know if you guys have seen this, but I saw some post online and it had it was pictures, different examples of in men's bathrooms where the urinals are underneath like pictures or designs on the wall that are women's asses so that it looks like when you are taking out your dick to pee that you are it's this very funny thing where you are fucking this woman in the ass. Yeah. Saw multiple examples of this type of imagery in men's bathrooms. But yeah, it's like, do you think that a pedophile, do you think a rapist, do you think an abuser is prevented by a sign on a bathroom? Do you think? Don't you think that if, okay, here's another question. For these transphobes, especially the specifically the TERFs, who believe that men are pretending to be women in order to rape and abuse, or if they get caught, to get out of accountability. Don't you think then for all of these cis men who are constantly pedophiling and abusing and raping and just what we're seeing constantly, don't you think then that they would all make that claim? Or do you realize that they don't do that because that's not necessary? Because that's not the reality of the world we live in, where abusers, often cisgender men, are held accountable. They're not. Why the fuck would they need to like not be cis men in their abusive actions, and then in any subsequent attempts for accountability? The men aren't being held accountable. They don't need to do all that. Yeah.
The heart-shaped herb and commune with their ancestors. They're just yelling at them about how England doesn't look the same anymore.
They got patriarchy.
The culture of the Anglo-Saxon is dying. Chicken tikka masala is actually a real Indian dish. One of the major sources for this section of the video is Sean Faye's The Transgender Issue, Trans Justice is Justice for All. It was a slightly dense but excellent read and full of citations. Highly recommend. It'll be part of the long ass list of
why would anyone want to fuck a year?
It was especially impactful to have a clear understanding of how hostile the UK media is and has been to trans people. I think as Americans we don't really see this as much because the tabloid culture there is so extreme. Royal watchers might be more aware of this because of the relationship between the tabloids and the royal family, especially its women, and most recently its relationship to Prince Harry and Meghan Markle, or Meghan Sussex, whatever you want to call yourself, girl. In this, Faye shares the story of Lucy Meadows, a teacher in the UK who transitioned and told her school. The school made an announcement about her transition, including her name change, in a school newsletter that quickly made the rounds into a local paper, and then the Daily Mail. Within 3 months of harassment, dead naming, calls to leave her job, Lucy Meadows took her own life in 2013. Columnist Richard Littlejohn led those attacks in national headlines titled, and I apologize for using these pronouns, "He's not only in the wrong body, he's in the wrong job."
Also, people who, like that journalist there, they should be held criminally responsible when their actions lead to someone dying by suicide. There's another story that I did not cover today because, you know, I kind of have my max on how many horrific stories I can cover. I can even just like think about because if there's too many, then I just will mentally collapse. But this woman whose name was Noelia Castillo Ramos, who was a victim of a gang rape and attempted suicide. That suicide left her paralyzed, and then she fought to be euthanized because she had such deep depression and had incredibly horrific chronic pain, and so she just she was just euthanized. And this would not have happened had she not been the victim of a gang rape that ultimately led to her then being euthanized because she had previously attempted suicide. It left her paralyzed, and that only worsened her life quality. Yeah, I mean, it's just a horribly, horribly depressing story. Horribly depressing story. But I think about that with how these transphobes, like the one she just specifically is talking about, that when they go after trans people, when they bring harm to them, there is accountability that needs to be had there. And not every trans person who is harassed in this way takes their, ends up taking their life. But there are these examples of that happening. And aside from that, it's the harassment and harm that it causes a person. Someone doesn't have to die by suicide for it to deeply, deeply affect their life with the then subsequent attacks they are subjected to, the harassment and the threats, the psychological harm that deals out.
The implication and fear.
I was going to link the Pokemon Center stock. Yeah. I think maybe that's enough for one night.
Mongering that this would be confusing for children, that it's hinted at something inherently perverse. Stonewall, the UK charity, published in 2017 that 45%
also
of
Spanish
trans
right-wing
young
media
people
is
had
trying to blame the
attempted
gang rape to
suicide
Meta people
at least once. Faye says Meadows had not been a public figure or a celebrity, nor had she ever sought to be. She had wrestled privately with gender for many years, and her decision to transition was, by all accounts, not taken lightly. All she had done was be trans, and to be honest about who she was, continuing with a job she had been good at in a school that supported her. As much as the gender critical people pretend it's not, this is the result they want.
Yeah.
What other reaction can be expected by telling people that they are perverse penis havers? Yet as shameless as this was, Faye explains that within a few years, trans activists were seen as the real bullies. A worthy movement to help a minority group has become a form of McCarthyism in bad wigs and fishnets, thanks to a bunch of bullies, trolls, and humorless misogynists. Feel too daunted to venture an opinion on anything transgender? Great. That's exactly—
Wow, not the humorless misogynists. Come on, misogyny is funny. Why don't these...
how the bullies like it. I love how those with the most power call those who stand up for themselves bullies. They pretend they have some deep insight that they want to have, or that they want to ask really, pertinent questions about things. But really what they want to do is grill people about their genitals. They want to interrogate people on their sex change operations.
Fucking weird.
Their
It's
sex
creepy
lives, their
and
romantic
weird.
lives. Questions about shaving, not about how to make their lives easier. Just these freak show curiosity corners where people who are already dealing with massive harassment and discrimination are forced to justify and explain their existence in the face of reductive and hyperbolic talking points.
Who's the person who's not normal in this situation? A trans person who's trying to exist in peace and have the rights that all human beings deserve, or the person who's like, let me see your genitals? The person who is constantly talking about a stranger's genitals. Which of those people is the actual fucking freak?
Quote from Who's Afraid of Gender by the Judith Butler. Imagine if you were Jewish and someone tells you that you are not. Imagine if you are a lesbian and someone laughs in your face and says you are confused since you are really heterosexual. Imagine if you are black and someone tells you are white, or that you are not racialized in this ostensibly post-racial world. Or imagine you are Palestinian and someone tells you that Palestinians do not exist, which people do. Who are these people?
Yeah, you mean people like Mike Huckabee?
Who think that they have the right to tell you who you are and what you are not, and dismiss your own definition of who you are, who tell you that self-determination is not a right that you are allowed to exercise, who would subject you to medical and psychiatric review or mandatory surgical intervention before they are willing to recognize you in the name and sex you have given yourself, the ones to which you have arrived. Their definition is a form of effacement, and their right to define you is apparently more important than any right you have to determine who you are, how you live, what language comes closest to representing who you are. Whether it be trans kids in sports or trans children getting gender-affirming care, they never want the opinions of trans people. They want to lecture at trans people, call them into question, and then mock them when they get angry.
It's what the media does. The media is like, and today we're talking about are trans women in sports a problem? And here we have only transphobes to speak on the matter. It's the same thing they do with Palestine, where it's like, oh, let's talk again about the latest in Israel and Palestine, and we will only have on someone who is pro-Israel. We will only have on Zionist voices to provide a fair and balanced perspective here. It's so true, though, that it's like when talking about trans issues, they never talk to trans people. They never highlight, they never platform, they never listen to a trans person. It's always a transphobe. It's always someone who is motivated in, who has a specific purpose in making everyone else transphobic. They are biased in a very bigoted way, and they like have a political goal. Let's just talk about a subject at best they know nothing about, and worst are actively attacking. Yeah. It's like, let's talk about what it's like to be trans and hear from some, I mean, it's not even that they talk about what it's like to be trans. It's always, trans women in sports or trans or bathrooms. Or they will bring on the one trans person who is transphobic. They'll be like, and now from Blair White, and now from Brianna Wu, and they're tokens, right? They're tokens for the right wing. A Caitlyn Jenner, and they do that because they go, look, here's a trans person, and here's a trans person being so reasonable. Yeah, and then Brianna Wu, who frequently has a leopard's eating my face moment where she's like, I don't get it. I'm a moderate centrist, reasonable person on trans issues, and yet I'm being told that I should die. I'm like, yeah, girl. Yeah. Because you're dealing with Nazis. You're dealing with fascists. You think that they approve of you? You think that you're the one who's been picked? No. And don't get me started on the detransitioners. Oh my God, like Maya Poet or whatever. God.
They will bring allies out to talk to them.
They gotta have Scott Jennings on the CNN
attempting to have
panel.
an intellectual dialogue while ignoring that we're talking about the lives of real people and that we can ask questions. You just can't be a fucking asshole about it. Just like they do with Black people and other marginalized groups. They tell you who you are. They tell you your lived reality isn't real. And they tell you that if you're offended, it's because you are the wrong person. Colonial mindset. I'm going to say that a lot this video in this part of the section. And I'm not just saying that to make some piffy comparison for the sake of it. Even the trans women in sports argument fills me with rage. As I explained in a previous video about challengers, which I know y'all didn't watch, but that's okay. Black cis women in sports have historically been accused of
Serena
being
Williams,
men.
prime
Althea
example.
Gibson, a tennis player, was forced to take a testosterone test in the 1960s.
That's why these tests are fucking racist. They're racist. They are misogynistic.
These Black athletes were forced to segregate because they represented a literal threat to white supremacy.
Remember when they used to say I look too mannish? Black girl magic.
This is why there is a
It's what just happened to Cynthia Erivo. The disgusting vitriol that Cynthia Erivo was victim to during the when they were when they were doing the press tour for Wicked 2. And there was that moment where that fuck ass dude who has a history of, and I don't know how he keeps doing it, has a history of getting very close to celebrities and then pretty much assaulting them, like running up on them, recording the thing. I don't know, that guy. And Cynthia Erivo stepped in to protect Ariana, and just the amount of comments calling her a man, calling her gross and aggressive and just very, 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 very racist. I mean, misogynistic and racist.
An obsession in sports of having a great white hope, which we are now seeing play out with Caitlin Clark and Angel Reese in the WNBA. We have seen through history time and time again the threat of Black freedom or any kind of non-white person's freedom. Whenever there's a chance for them to get more rights or them to get more progress in the world, people will say, well, what about the women and children? Parentheses, white women and children. And so they will...
Me when I'm on the Titanic. But what about the women and children?
Treat people this way, marginalize them, and then hide the hand that they hit you with. And to me, just as someone who likes sports casually, don't worry, I'm not FD signifier. I'm not gonna make you watch a sports video. I learned my lesson from the first time. But the entire trans women in sports argument, even if I just took every single other aspect of it out of it, right? The thing that even doesn't make sense to me, if we're going to use common sense, is that people don't pay women in sports their due. The idea that a man who is not trans, right, would become trans in order to dominate women's sports is just a bird-brained idea. Brittany Griner is a 3-time Olympic gold medalist who played basketball in Russia because the WNBA doesn't pay well. And so she went to a country with horrible LGBTQ rights as an out lesbian to make a living. And you think that this is what... You think this is the winning coal? You thought Joanna Man was a true story? Is that what you guys are saying? There was just a post like a couple of weeks ago about like all the New York teams, and they left out New York Liberty, even though they are the current WNBA champions. At the time of recording, they are on a 5-game winning streak, but all anyone is ever talking about is the Knicks maybe making it in 7. And you think a cis man would purposely become a marginalized identity to do that? To be overworked, underpaid, undervalued on purpose? You think that? To use the TikTok sound, let me move.
Yeah, I mean, there's all the Michael Phelps of it all, where Michael Phelps has wacky genetics. Okay, he is they called him a genetic freak because he was, and he had this crazy wingspan, and that is what made him the greatest swimmer of all time. It was literally impossible, no matter how much someone could train, no matter how good they could be, to beat Michael Phelps because his lungs are 4 times the size of an elephant. And they praised him for it. They called him a genetic freak, but like positively. And now they want to police women of color and trans people for not fitting their neat little racist, misogynist, transphobic requirements of what a person should be like. Yeah.
The what mic away from me.
An actual mutant Michael Phelps.
You are under spells, people. It's also so jarring to me how infantilizing gender critical people treat trans men.
May I be vulnerable? I've never considered this. The Michael Phelps point. Yeah, I mean, that's why we talk about things here, because we always want to be considering things. We always want to go, oh, okay, wait, that's actually a great point. Or, a new perspective. And so the reason that we say these transphobic bans are not just bad for trans people, but they're bad for cisgender women, because there's already a long history here of cis women who have been discriminated against, especially Black and brown cis women, due to their genetics. And, Serena Williams, who's a great example of this, the way that she was smeared and disgustingly attacked. She's the greatest. She is the greatest. And because of her prolific tennis talent. They wanted to tear her down, and so they called her a man. They would accuse her of all sorts of things. They bashed her appearance, and so these types of laws are historically rooted in racism and misogyny.
And dismissing their experiences as a social contagion among
Who's this
teenage
woman
lesbians
and what is her
and
YouTube
girls
channel?
with
Her name is
autism
Princess Weeks,
who
and
are
it's
either seeking
and
to
it's linked at the
escape
top.
the misogyny that comes with developing an adult female body, or who are shamed and distressed by homophobia. I'm cis. I'm bisexual. I've been a tomboy. I'm a feminist. I've never wanted to be a boy. I just want to not be in a patriarchy. And I wouldn't even want to be a boy to escape patriarchy, because as a feminist, I know it doesn't even work that way. But even when I was a kid, I wanted to be a girl. I wanted to play a girl in video games. That's why I play so many fighting games. I wanted to always be a kick-ass woman. I want to be Sindel. When Pokemon Crystal let me be a girl, I think that feeling I had was the closest to what I think genuine euphoria is like. I knew myself in that way then. And even as someone who is cis, the fact that I think back to how much it meant to me at 8 to have a video game where I could be my gender, why wouldn't I believe someone who says that about their own experiences about not having their gender match? Like, even in that shallow example of just wanting my video game self to match my actual gender, like, if I understand the connection there, if I understand that, I understand why another 8-year-old would feel a disconnect, because you're socialized and you know what these things mean in concept, and you can kind of feel when it isn't matching up. Despite all that sass, I do understand that there are questions people genuinely have, and that is fair. But I would just remind you, especially all my fellow marginalized people, how irritating it is to have to explain your existence and humanity to people. I have seen 2 things that cis women...
Yeah, explain in order to justify. And I think something I always think about is when you are a kid and you are growing up and you're developing, it's already confusing. It's already you're being socialized. There's things that you're being taught and you might not understand, but you're like, that's just how it goes. And now imagine being a trans child, being a child who not only, like all children, are growing up and a lot of things are very confusing and you're experiencing things for the first time, often why it's very confusing, and you're being told things from adults, you're being told things from the world around you that you are growing up in. And you throw on top of that being trans, and that is something that is a lot for an adult to be processing their identity, you know, the struggles we have as adults, but as a child where you're so afraid of doing the wrong thing, right? That's the thing with children, and why people can so easily manipulate and use and abuse children, because children naturally want to make adults happy. They want to feel like they're doing a good job. They want to they want to please the adults, because adults have power, and they don't understand that concept yet, but adults are authority, and we are taught to respect and to listen to authority. And so you think about you know, trans children, and especially ones who are growing up in families where not only is that not something that would ever be explained, like any safety, any room to ask those questions, but it's actively discouraged. That it's like you are told, if you even start to express any of those feelings, ask any of those questions, that it's wrong, that you have done something wrong, that you are wrong. And that is horrible. That is horrible. I just think about how can we do that while claiming that we care about children, that we want to raise them with compassion and in a safe and secure environment, and just how cruel that is. I just think about all the trans kids who are out there, especially the ones who are not being raised in a loving environment where they can even ask questions or express how they feel. Children are the most vulnerable, and we consistently fail them. We really do. It makes me so heartbroken. It really does. The way that we fail kids constantly, whether they are victim to genocides, they are paying the price for blood wars that are started by adults, or they are trans and queer kids who are being told that something is wrong with them, or being made to feel that that they are wrong. Immigrant children who are being scapegoated. We do not protect kids. We fail them constantly. Kids, too many kids who are food insecure, who are living in a car or living on, living in a shelter. God, when I was a teacher, and I have empathy for children and I care about children outside of me, just like having been a substitute elementary teacher. But I remember like the kids who were clearly very hungry because they weren't getting enough food, and that even with the discounted food prices, sometimes, couldn't still afford lunch. And like you could sense that. You sense the kids who did not have enough. And you sense the kids that school was a break for them from an unstable home life, or kids who, their parents were just having to work constantly. So it's either that they're just alone at home, or at least at school they get to socialize and have the structure of a school day. It just is really, it's the true measure of a society is how we treat the most vulnerable. And so often we show how the way we treat the most vulnerable is in the most horrifying of ways. And that is a true measure of a sick society, a society that is failing. New India bill to amend transgender rights sparks protests. India's parliament has passed a controversial bill that seeks to change how transgender people are legally recognized and their right to self-identify amid protests by opposition parties and the LGBTQ community. The government says the changes will make welfare benefits more accessible and strengthen an existing law against exploitation and trafficking, but critics warn it would exclude many transgender, non-binary, and gender fluid people. India is estimated to have around 2 million transgender people, though activists say the true number is higher, and legal recognition remains uneven. The legislation was approved by both houses this week and now needs the president's assent to become law. In 2014, India's Supreme Court recognized transgender people as a third gender and affirmed their rights to self-identify. Despite legal protections, many transgender people in India continue to face discrimination and limited access to education, healthcare, and formal employment. Now, this new bill, essentially a proposed amendment to the 2019 Transgender Persons Act, centers on how a transgender person is defined. The government says the current definition is too vague and makes it difficult to identify those who are most marginalized. It argues that a narrower definition will help ensure welfare benefits such as job reservations and healthcare support reach those who need them. It says the changes are intended to protect people facing extreme and oppressive discrimination to prevent exploitation and trafficking. The bill removes the right to self-identify and instead limits recognition to those defined by biological or physical traits. And see how they wrap this up in the language of progress. Lucas, thank you for the 3 years. They wrap this up in the language of progress in the same way that these that these bills, these pieces of legislation that are that are actually rooted in bigotry and the desire to censor and prevent, for example, trans kids from accessing life-saving information online. They're wrapped up in the language of protecting children from being exploited, preventing children from being trafficked. This bill, and so this is not protection but violation. And what we need to understand here is that this shit is connected. So when I say that J.K. Rowling is contributing material harm to trans people, but also cisgender women who do not fit, cis people who don't fit the rigid gender norms that still exist in our society, that hurt intersex, non-binary, queer people. Like, obviously these bills are primarily aimed at the trans community, but she is an active anti-trans activist, and she is committing material harm on a global level, because this isn't just the bills that are being passed in the UK. These bills then will be used as legal groundwork for other anti-trans legislation in other countries. We saw how in Australia, bills that are, curbing the ability for kids under a certain teenagers of a certain age to use the internet, these child safety laws, it's the same language that they're using right now in these US bills that are being promoted by people like Marsha Blackburn, who is a right-wing bigot. And so this legislation, it works in tandem, because when one bill will succeed in, say, the UK, then that is used by proponents of similar legislation in other countries. I'm pretty sure some British politicians literally met with her a few years ago. Yeah, no, she is. She is literally meeting with people in political power. She is funding anti-trans groups, like nonprofits. She is using her influence and her resources and her power to lobby on behalf of anti-trans legislation, meeting with politicians. She is committing serious material harm. And so that is why, really, there is no separating art from the artist here. J.K. Rowling is dangerous. She is a dangerous billionaire on the, truly comparable to Elon Musk going after trans people because of his whole woke mind virus and stuff. They are both billionaires. They are politically connected. They use their resources and their influence to cause actual material harm. And she has stated explicitly that she uses the money she gets from her residuals, from her current and future projects, from her enormous war chest to fund this, to fund all of her anti-trans work. She has immense cultural power. Yes, she has also been influencing people who follow her, who believe that she has been the target of an unfair woke ideology, cancel culture mob. And so she has directly influenced a lot of people's beliefs on trans issues as well. These goddamn woke moralists
kind of bristle up against whenever trans women and other trans inclusive feminists try to explain their embrace
Yeah,
of
the fucking photo of her on a yacht smoking after an anti-trans bill in the UK that she funded got passed. Yeah, she was bragging about it. She's bragging about it because she is causing these things to happen. She's doing this. She's continuing to do this. And guess what? Every time she wins, every time she succeeds, it further incentivizes her and other transphobes. They go, aha, it's working. Aha, there is a direct output here from our input. It's happening. Every dollar that she profits off, she uses to personally fund legislation that is destroying trans lives. And then contributing to this culture that is so transphobic and results in trans people being harassed, being fired from their jobs, being harmed in so many different ways.
Transness into womanhood. And those two things usually are that gender is a social construct and that gender is a performance. There's also like the offense of cis and certain words. And I just would remind people that certain words are used for an academic and medical purposes. And let's be clear, at one point in time, there was a group of queer women who wanted to spell women with a Y. Okay? It's not that deep. Something being a social construct means that it doesn't
Magdalena, I'm so happy to hear that.
Objective reality. It exists because human beings give it power. Now, that does not mean that things that are social constructs don't matter. Race, money, countries, as well as gender are all social constructs. But we know those things are important because of how it allows society to function. Gender roles are crafted by the dominant society and then trickle down to everyone else. Men and women, because both of them are social constructs, are taught by society how they are meant to act in alignment with their gender. Hence why people will also say it is in part a performance.
Shouts
and I think
out Pop Culture
Judith Butler
Detective.
puts it really well. We inherit gender. When I was born, I didn't have an inherent concept of womanhood. I learned that from women around me, from my mother, from my...
Yeah, that is social conditioning. People can't just disagree with someone's beliefs or identity. They actively try and eradicate. Not caring is literally free. Yeah, here's the thing. Okay, if we lived in a world where trans rights and trans lives were not constantly under attack, where they were not experiencing real material harm, then someone saying, I don't agree with your identity, I don't agree with who you are, that does not matter. Like from a I guess kind of moral or just respecting people's standpoint, it does. But the issue is that the reality of the world we are in is someone saying, I do not agree with trans identity, does result in real material harm, because that then lends itself to people making political decisions, legislation being passed that denies trans existence, that denies trans people their liberties. So it's like, it does matter. It's not an agree to disagree. It's not a, difference of opinions, but we'll shake hands and go our separate ways. Unfortunately, that is not the world that we live in.
Sisters from Ashley and Topanga. How you dress as a woman signifies things to the world. I remember my mother telling me as like a teenager that
Cutie.
wearing
Thank you for the
red
gifted.
lipstick or red nail polish was too adult for me, right? Like that is not an objective reality, right? That wearing red.
I love that
is
she has
too
red lipstick
adult
on right
for a
now.
child. That's not a real thing, right? But red and hypersexuality are linked in media. That is why you see it on all the like Lolita covers, this use of like dark pinks and reds to allude to sexuality. And so those colors become linked, even though that is not an objective reality. Red is not inherently sex. And we know this even when it comes to how we do beauty and race. Wearing your hair naturally is a performance of Black identity as well. It means different things, sometimes political, at other times fashionable. It can also be exotified. Even in terms of male gender performance, men are constantly, especially now, having to prove their masculinity. They police each other in how they behave. They normalize hypersexuality even if it is abusive, because patriarchy tells them that certain things make them men. And certain fashion choices evolve as being for men and not for men. I mean, when you look at Milli Vanilli, right? They were sex symbols. Like, women wanted to sleep with these guys. And when I watched the documentary, it's a very good documentary, actually, it's on Paramount Plus. I was like, oh, right. The codifiers of queerness were not always the same. So people look at that and saw straight. There's a reason why certain fashion choices have signified queerness or alternativeness throughout the years. They are pushing against the social and performative nature of identity. There is no one universal beauty standard because it is objective. And we see beauty trends in a certain way become a way to indicate certain identities, like the trad wife conservative style with the milkmaid dresses, something I take personal offense to as someone who is milkmaid dress coded. Skims is now making these shirts with like fake nipple rings, which again, I find personally offensive because that used to mean something in society. To have nipple piercings, it used to mean you was a bad bitch. Okay? I got mine done because of Rihanna in the Wild Thoughts videos.
I don't know if you could take it. No, you want.
Bro, or what was it Kim Kardashian who put out the thong that had fake hair on it? Where it's like, hold on a sec. We're doing hairy pussy thongs? Hold on. The Merkin thong. Yes. Kim K put out fake hairy bush thongs. And a lot of people were like, excuse me, I have been rocking a real bush. Ain't no fake bush up in here. And I have been told that I am disgusting, that I am dirty, that I am not feminine enough. And now we're stolen valor here. We're doing fake bush, hairy bush thongs.
See me naked.
For some people, tattoos are not feminine. For some people, they are. These statements do not ignore that it is a lived reality for those who occupy, in this context, a gendered space. It simply illustrates that we, as individual people, did not create them for ourselves, nor did our mothers, nor our grandmothers, and so on. We inherit these roles through social context that created, and therefore there is not one universal objective reality, but the reality we have inherited. Therefore it can be changed. Let's not forget, it used to be a crime, like an actual crime, for women to wear pants because it went against the social role that women were expected to play. Transness and non-binary identities are not the first time that humans have pushed back against the idea that their gender assigned at birth should dictate how they move in the real world. And I don't know about all of you, but I don't want to be defined solely by my biology, by my womb, because that same biology.
It's so boring too. It's so boring. You only want to exist inside of this tiny, fake-ass, socially constructed box? That is boring as hell.
Biology has been used to tell women that they are inherently other things.
30-year-old Adriana Smith was about 9 weeks pregnant when she started having bad headaches in February.
They did a CT scan and she had blood clots all in her head. So they had asked me if they could do a procedure to relieve them, and I said yes. And then they called me back and they said that they couldn't do it.
Because of Georgia's heartbeat bill, which bans abortions after a fetal heartbeat is detected, her family says they weren't given any say in what happens next.
It is a slippery slope to put all of the weight into what it means to be anything on purely biology. When we are named a gender, however, we are entered into a class of people so named. And if we rename ourselves, we move into another category whose history no one individually possesses. Gender categories change throughout time, and feminism has always relied on the historically changing character of gender categories in order to demand changes in the way that women and men are defined and treated. If these were timeless categories, they could not be redefined, which means that whatever category of woman once meant is what it means forever. I really love this book, by the way. You've heard me emphasize the racial and colonial aspects of this whole thing, and I just want to illustrate that point one more time, right? So the Center for Global Development is a nonprofit with the goal of reducing global poverty and inequality by encouraging policy change in the United States and other rich countries through rigorous research and active engagement with the policy community. They have a solid ranking among charities, and while I'm not here to say they are perfect, I didn't do that much research into this part, I think someone who claims to be fighting for women and girls would not take money out of the hands of a charity that does work to help impoverished women and girls around the world. That's suspicious. That's weird. But this is what J.K. Rowling supports, loudly and proudly. In fact, she just announced on the 24th of May that she is starting the J.K. Rowling Women's Fund.
This is my first time here. I've only cried 3 times. Oh, welcome in. I promise that we do fun things too. Like, I'm gonna game in just a second. We're gonna do some fun Friday night gaming. And I always try, even when covering heavy stories constantly, to shape the commentary and the vibes here around compassion. You know, I think the outpouring of love and compassion and solidarity that you will experience in a community like this helps to handle the news as it is constantly devastating and frustrating and can really do a number on your mental. So I think it's the community aspect here that hopefully will be a lifeline. You know, William is calling. Okay, that's a good place. I did want to break this up. So I definitely want to continue with the rest of this video. There's like 40 minutes left in it.